So last night I went to game one of the 76ers versus Toronto Raptors. And needless to say, that was probably a worthy $102 spent. I was sitting on the balcony. I think it was like 321, row 16, something along the lines of that. And the entire, Scotiabank Arena had like white shirts hanging over the chairs. And I don't know why they put Jordan Lloyd on the shirt. The guy must have gotten fired for doing that. Somebody got some heat for doing that. But it was a great event nonetheless. But rather than actually being able to consistently take notes on every quarter, I just kind of like condensed everything down, because between the crowd yelling or cheering, I should say, in one ear and people just booing in the other ear and me losing my voice, it was kind of hard to keep track of all the shit that was going on this game. So without further ado, let's begin. But yeah, nonetheless, wonderful game by the Toronto Raptors overall. You see a score 108-95. This shouldn't be the real score, because the 30 stringers for the Toronto Raptors came on with 3 minutes left in the game, and they scored absolutely nothing. And this has been a recurring theme every fucking game they've played. So really, the score is probably 85-108. But nonetheless, it was still a good win by the Raptors. So I'm going into the first quarter, right? And I noticed immediately that the matchups that I was talking about in my previous series preview video, a lot of that actually did not end up happening when it pertained to Ben Simmons, because I thought that they were going to try and get Lowry off of Simmons. But in the first quarter, they really couldn't get that mismatch by the looks of that. And it did somewhat bite them in the butt early on, because the Philadelphia 76ers were able to actually achieve a little bit of their, run a little bit of their dribble drive penetration and get some quick buckets by Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler. And this was in the very early second quarter to the entirety of the first quarter. Now, when I look at the score overall, and as you're probably seeing right now, look at the 76ers starters. Multiple, all of their starting five, right? Double digits. And at one point they had James Ennis on, who I think did a very good job, given even though it says he's minus 18, the man hit 4 of his 5 shots in 21 minutes play. That's better than a lot of the other starters right now. But anyway, back to the first quarter. It seemed to be a little bit of back and forth. The Raptors took a while to, kind of get in the rhythm of their offense, and that's what allowed Philadelphia to actually string together I think it was a 7-0 run to start the game. But nonetheless, Raptors managed to bounce back, and immediately you can tell from this game that Kawhi came to play. For anyone that had doubt that Kawhi was only able to put up such good numbers because of the Orlando Magic, this game should have erased that for you, because man was unstoppable. The 76ers had no answer to Kawhi Leonard. In fact, the best defender the entire night on Kawhi Leonard was Ben Simmons. You stick Jimmy Butler on him, you stick Tobias Harris on him, you rotate James Ennis, whoever you throw at him, they could not stop Kawhi. And the shots he was getting, a lot of them were really contested, and he was operating in the post, doing his spin around jumpers, fadeaways, shooting threes. The man was on fire. And to assist him was Pascal Siakam. Now, Kawhi got it going pretty early. Siakam started to come online towards the end of the first, and especially in the beginning of the second, where, this is what's been the story for Toronto. It's kind of this two-headed monster what did they combine for tonight? 74 points? Right, two-headed monster for Toronto with all these extensions that can, hands that can still do work in the form of Danny Green and Kyle Lowry. Now, first quarter, basically trading buckets, right? Raptors do get somewhat of a comfortable lead. I think it's not that much. It's 8 points, right, to end off the first quarter. But nonetheless, they're in a good position to extend that lead. And throughout the second quarter, that's exactly what they did. Now, the second quarter score, pretty close, but you can really start to see that towards the end of the second quarter, Toronto just kept making their shots, and they kept clamping down on Philadelphia in the paint. This is especially the case with Marc Gasol and Joel Embiid. Now, I didn't want to take the season matchup too seriously because it's a different type of basketball in the playoffs. But what we saw throughout the season statistically proved to be true in the playoffs this game, because Joel Embiid, guys, was completely neutralized. Well, I shouldn't say completely, but he was held to 16 points of 5 for 18 shooting. And he was the highest plus minus, not really. The highest plus minus was TJ McConnell, but man only had 16 points. He did not score on Gasol at all. In fact, he only scored 3 points with Gasol on the floor the entire game. And those 3 points came from a post move after he got a mismatch onto Danny Green and a foul and one. Joel Embiid is arguably the best player for the 76ers. So for him to be held to 16 points without the other members of their team, taking up that scoring load, that's going to spell disaster. This is going to end up like very similar to the Magic series, where Philadelphia does have a strong starting lineup. They have some length. They can shoot the three particularly well. But if your best player in the post and the one you rely on, alongside Ben Simmons, is just taken out of the game like he was tonight or last night, you're not going to win games. And you could see that Gasol, throughout his entire, he wasn't even playing, what was it? He played, he played 26 minutes. 26 minutes. And then he was rested for Serge Ibaka. And Ibaka, wow, I was very impressed with him. I think Gasol came off in, the third quarter, somewhere, I think, 10 minutes into the third quarter, Nick Nurse throws him off, and he throws Ibaka on Joel Embiid. And at that moment, I'm actually a little bit concerned because now, the lid's off of Embiid, so to speak. One of his harder matchups, Gasol, is gone, so he's probably going to explode. Nope, not the case. Ibaka did a tremendous job in actually being able to take over where Gasol left off and really challenge, Embiid, make it very difficult for him to actually get buckets in the paint. And you just saw the entire Raptor offense converge onto Simmons whenever he tried to drive, forcing a pass out. And while, shooters like Tobias Harris, James Ennis, and even Jimmy Butler were able to knock down their shots, over time, they weren't able to because the Raptors shut down the paint, so they were able to cheat and rush the three-point line. And basically, their length forced Philadelphia into committing, turnovers and make bad shot choices. It was just very suffocating defense, as we've seen from the Raptors for the past 3 to 4 games. Now, we had a little bit later down into the third quarter, and there's a moment where J.J. Redick is making back-to-back threes. I think he made it consecutive, 9 points off of threes. And I think, here comes Philadelphia. Here comes the shooter. This is their version of Danny Green, and he's lighting it up. But then he gets called for a technical foul, and I think that really deflated. That moment in particular, it just kind of sucked the air and any potential comeback from the 76ers. Because after that, the Raptors pushed the lead back to, I think, 12 points or something like that, but they extend the lead further, and the 76ers are never really able to come back from that. And it was just overall, I think, a really well thought out game from Toronto. I mean, if you look at Kawhi, the man was wonderful. 45 points tonight. Siakam, 12 of 15 from the floor. And, they go into the fourth quarter, they're still playing. Kawhi and Siakam are still playing, whereas the rest of the starters, mainly Gasol, and Lowry at times, are off. And you have people, and this is where I have one concern about the Toronto Raptors, and I've had this concern for about 2 games now. This game showed that Siakam and Leonard will always show up to play, and this will usually be good enough against most teams. And it was good enough against Philadelphia's, let's get everyone to score in double figures. They had way more people scoring in double figures than the Raptors. The Raptors were a two-headed monster tonight. Make no mistake about that. Even so, right, Philadelphia is playing this more distributive, team. I don't want to say they're playing better team basketball, but more people are scoring. And I thought that would actually, that style would counter the Raptors, but it didn't. Anyway, back to the main issue that I saw and I have had in the past 2 games with the Raptors. Let's say one of these players has an off night, Lowry or Siakam. Somebody else needs to reliably pick up the scoring load. Now I know, you look at how much Lowry, Gasol, and Danny Green, they shot average to / below average. I don't think they're gonna shoot this bad again. Right, I think Norman Powell in particular is going to kind of like pick it up because he's shown that he definitely can in the previous games. But there's not really, even with all this said and done, there's not really that third definitive option that the Raptors have. They have like all these other players that can slot into the third option. But like when the chips are down in the clutch, I haven't really seen, and we haven't seen it because the games have not gone to the point, but there's been no indication of a clear third option. You know what I mean? It's always, Siakam can be number one night, Leonard can be number one, back and forth between those two. But we don't really have, as the Raptors, a solid third option, a third person you can turn to when the likes of Leonard and Siakam might be having an off night or are being locked down. It hasn't come to bite the Raptors in the butt, but I think over the course of the series, I think Philadelphia will be able to adjust and really put pressure on Siakam and Leonard. And it's going to be up to, I don't want to say Lowry, but, Gasol and Danny Green to kind of like become that third option, or even Norman Powell for that matter. I mentioned in, a couple videos ago, Norman Powell can be the X factor to this Toronto team. If he can be that third option coming off that bench or slotting into the starting lineup when either in one of Nick Nurse's rotations, the Raptors will be incredibly, incredibly hard to beat. But overall, Fred VanVleet, rest of the players are iffy. I think for the most part, the bench of the 76ers tonight, I don't want to say they outplayed Toronto, but I think for the most part they scored more than Toronto. And some people are going to argue, well, Toronto's going to win overall just because they have bench depth. And while I do agree with this, I wouldn't take it so seriously. Like the bench gives them 100% of a definitive answer, because we saw what happened last year. Toronto had a wonderful bench against Cleveland and LeBron James. Now I know it's different because they had the best player, but that team was pieced together by the trade deadline, and they whooped the Raptors' supposed bench depth. Bench depth does not mean shit. You're gonna in the playoffs as much. You need 8 reliable guys. You're running a tight 8-man rotation, 9-man rotation. You need 8 to 9 reliable people that can score. And if you look at Philadelphia tonight, they, for the most part, they didn't have that, but they showed with their lineup that multiple people can get double figures, right? I didn't even know who James Ennis was. And he still did a decent job. The Raptors, right? Not so much the case. The bench in total scored 10 points. 10 freaking points to Philadelphia's, what? I think this is like 5, 7, 20 plus points from the bench, right? So to say that, like, scoring wise, the bench of Philadelphia outplayed Toronto tonight, or yesterday night. But it didn't matter because the Raptors were just too good with their starters, who mean a lot more in the playoffs. They outplayed the 76ers by a lot, and as such, they got the W. Now, before I end this video off, I just want to give a shout out to the one guy who was wearing a purple hoodie, loud as hell. I loved it. He had a beer in his hand. He was like standing behind like the last balcony section row, and he got into it with 3 Philly fans. I don't know how and why we got Philly fans. Well, they're supporting Philadelphia, but they managed to somehow. I was graced with 3 Philadelphia fans sitting about 2 rows beneath me, right? And the whole night you could hear boo from one side of like the section. They just kept booing them, and then towards the end of the game, when it was being put away, these Philadelphia fans, what they do is they take the shirt and they're like, "Where's number 8? Where's number 8? You guys know who number 8 is?" And they're obviously shit talking Jordan Lloyd, right? And because he's not on the team anymore. And the guy in the purple hoodie towards my like far right, the game's going on. He's like, "Oh no, we're in trouble. We're in trouble. Dwayne Casey, call a timeout." And then Like every time, because this is at this point the both benches, like the third stringers for Toronto are playing, and everyone knows they can't score shit, right? But so the Philadelphia bench, like their third stringer, starts scoring, and every time the Sixers fan would say, "Who's number 8?" The guy in the purple hoodie was just he would just keep saying, "Oh God, we're in trouble! Call a timeout, Dwayne Case," and it's just going back and forth, and it was a really wonderful experience. So thank you to the Sixers fans for showing up there, and thank you to the guy in the purple hoodie, because my God, were you funny. All right, guys. I'll see you guys after game 2.